Hello, my name is Olivia. I want to tell you about my journey, how I became fluent in English. It wasn't easy. I made mistakes. I felt shy, and many times I wanted to give up. But I didn't. I found my own way to learn, and now I speak English with confidence. I started with small steps and easy words. When I look back at how I began my English journey, I always remember one quiet afternoon. I was sitting on my bed with a notebook in my hand. The room was warm and the window was open, letting in a soft breeze. Outside, I could hear the sound of children playing and a few birds singing. But inside me, I felt nervous. I had just come back from school, and something had happened that made me stop and think. That day in our English class, the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves in English. When it was my turn, I froze. My heart started to beat very fast. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I knew the sentence. It was just, "My name is Olivia." But in that moment, I felt like I had forgotten everything I had ever learned. Everyone was looking at me, and I could see some students whispering and smiling. I felt small. I sat down quickly and looked at my desk, wishing I could disappear. When I got home, I didn't talk to anyone. I went straight to my room and sat on my bed. I felt embarrassed, but also sad. I didn't want to feel that way again. I wanted to be able to speak. I wanted to say even one small sentence without fear. That's when I picked up my notebook and wrote one sentence in big letters. I want to speak English. After writing that sentence, I felt something change inside me. It was not a big change. It was like a small light turning on in a dark room. I looked at the sentence again and read it out loud. I want to speak English. Then I wrote 5 simple words I already knew: apple, water, friend, book, and happy. I read them out loud too, slowly, carefully, like I was saying magic words. It felt silly at first, but I smiled anyway. The next morning, I woke up and read the same 5 words again. I didn't feel scared reading them. I felt calm. I added 5 more words: school, blue, cat, pencil, and mother. I said them out loud while brushing my hair. I said them again while walking to school. I repeated them softly under my breath. Some words I already knew, but I wanted to make them part of my everyday thinking. Every day after that, I wrote 5 new words in my notebook. I made a rule for myself: only 5 words a day, not more. I didn't want to rush. I wanted to enjoy learning. I said the words out loud. I used them in small sentences. This is my pencil. I have a blue pen. My friend is happy. These were not big sentences, but they made me feel strong. Sometimes I didn't know the meaning of a word, so I looked it up. Sometimes I spelled it wrong, but I wrote it again and again until I got it right. I even made flashcards and stuck them on my bedroom wall. Chair was on the closet. Mirror was on the mirror. Door was on the door. I turned my room into a small English world. One evening, my mom walked into my room and looked around. She laughed and said, "Your room looks like a school." I laughed too and said, "Yes, it's my English school." She smiled and said, "Keep going, Olivia. I'm proud of you." That moment made me feel happy. Someone had noticed. Someone believed in me. At school, I didn't speak much, but I listened more. When the teacher spoke, I listened to the words, not just the meaning. I noticed how she moved her mouth, how she said each sound. I went home and practiced in front of the mirror. Hello, how are you? My name is Olivia. This is my bag. At first, I felt silly talking to myself, but soon I started enjoying it. The mirror became my best friend. I smiled at myself, corrected myself, and practiced again. One day in class, the teacher asked a simple question. What color is your bag? I looked at my bag and raised my hand. My heart was beating fast, but I didn't lower my hand. The teacher called on me and I said slowly, "My bag is blue." My voice was quiet, but clear. The teacher smiled and said, "Very good, Olivia." That small praise felt like a big trophy. I held on to that moment for a long time. After that, I started raising my hand more. Not every day and not for big answers. But when I knew the words, I tried to speak. Sometimes I made mistakes. I once said, "I am go to school," and a classmate laughed. I felt my face turn red. But the teacher gently corrected me. "Say, I am going to school." I repeated it. "I am going to school." The teacher nodded, and I felt a little better. Kept writing in my notebook every day. I still remember some of the pages. One page had only food words: bread, rice, juice, apple, and egg. Another page had action words: run, jump, read, write, and sing. I made drawings next to the words. I didn't just want to read them. I wanted to remember them with feelings and pictures. Sometimes at night, I would lie in bed and try to think in English. I would look at my ceiling and say, "Today was a good day. I learned 5 new words." Or I would say, "Tomorrow I will speak in class." These small talks with myself helped me build confidence. They were my secret practice. One Saturday, my little cousin came to visit. She was only 6 years old and liked to play teacher. She said, "Let's play school. You be the student." I agreed and sat down. She said, "Tell me 5 English words." I smiled and said, "Cat, dog, ball, milk, and sun." She clapped her hands and said, "Very good, Olivia." We both laughed, but inside, I felt proud. I had come so far from the girl who couldn't even say, "My name is Olivia," in front of her class. Slowly, I noticed changes in myself. I started reading simple English books. I picked up small storybooks from the library. I read 1 page each day. If I didn't know a word, I didn't panic. I just underlined it and looked it up later. I wanted to understand the story, but I also wanted to enjoy it. My favorite book was about a little bear who went to school. The sentences were easy. The bear wakes up. The bear packs his bag. The bear walks to school. I read that book many times. Each time, I read it faster and understood more. Then one day, something special happened. Our English teacher said, "Next week, we will show a cartoon in class. It is in English." I felt excited and nervous. I had never watched a full English cartoon without help. On the day of the show, I sat in the front row. The cartoon started. At first, it was hard to follow. But then I heard a word, apple, and I smiled. I knew that word. Then I heard run, happy, and friend. I knew those words too. I whispered the words to myself as I watched. I felt like I was part of the story. It was a small moment, but it felt big to me. I had started with small words, and now I was understanding a cartoon in English. That was the day I realized something very important. I was growing. My English was growing. After the cartoon, I wanted to watch more, but I didn't have many English shows at home. Still, I decided to try. I asked my mom if I could use her phone for a while each day. She agreed, and I started watching short videos for kids. They were funny, colorful, and full of simple English. I didn't understand everything, but I didn't stop. I watched and listened and repeated. I even laughed at the jokes, even if I didn't get all of them. Each video helped me a little more. I noticed how people spoke, how their words moved smoothly. I started copying them. Sometimes I would pause the video and repeat the line. I like cookies. Let's go outside. It's a sunny day. I said them out loud and smiled. I was no longer afraid of speaking. I was starting to enjoy it. That was the beginning of something new. I was no longer just writing words in a notebook. I was listening. I was watching. I was speaking. I was using English in my real life. And that's when I realized, if I wanted to grow even more, I had to bring English into my world. Not just in books or papers, but in my everyday fun. I had to make English feel like a friend I spent time with, not a subject I was afraid of. That's how I found my next big step. I watched English shows like they were my best friends. After I started using simple words every day, something inside me changed. I no longer saw English as a mountain I could never climb. It was still hard, yes, but now it felt like a road I could walk on, slowly, step by step. And one thing I learned very quickly was this. If I wanted to get better at speaking and understanding English, I had to listen to it more often. Not just from my teacher or in class. I had to find ways to hear English every single day, in my own time, in my own space. It all began on a rainy Saturday morning. I remember it clearly. The sky was gray, and the sound of raindrops tapping on the window made everything feel cozy. I was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, with my notebook beside me. I had already written my 5 new words for the day, but I felt like I wanted to do more. That day, I didn't want to read or write. I wanted to listen. I wanted to hear how real people spoke English. I picked up my mom's phone and opened a video app. I typed English cartoons in the search bar. Many colorful pictures popped up. Some had animals, some had kids, and some had funny characters with big eyes and happy voices. I picked one that looked friendly, a cartoon about a little dog, named Max and his adventures in the neighborhood. The video was only 5 minutes long, so I thought, okay, let me try just this one. From the first second, I was hooked. Max had a high voice and spoke in clear, slow English. Hello, my name is Max. Do you want to play? I smiled. I understood that. Then he said, let's go to the park. I paused the video and said the sentence out loud. Let's go to the park. It felt fun. I didn't feel like I was studying. I felt like I was playing with the language, just like Max was playing with his ball. I watched the video again, and this time I repeated every sentence Max said. This is my friend, Lily. We like to run. Oh no, where is my ball? I said every line out loud, copying the voice, the sound, the rhythm. I was not just learning words, I was learning how to say them, how to use feelings in my voice, how to make English sound natural. That one video turned into 2, then 3, then 10. I didn't even notice how much time had passed. When my mom called me for lunch, I looked up, surprised. Already? I said, laughing. That afternoon, I felt happier than I had in days. I had discovered something amazing, something that felt like a secret. I could learn English while having fun. From that day forward, watching English shows became part of my daily life. It wasn't homework. It wasn't practice. It was my favorite part of the day. Every afternoon after school, I would finish my homework, eat a snack, and then sit down with my notebook and phone. I called it my English time. I even drew a little clock on the cover of my notebook and wrote, 4 p.m., English time, in bright colors. I didn't just watch random videos. I made a list of my favorite shows. Max the dog was still number 1. Then I found a show about a family of bears, another one about a curious monkey, and even one with singing vegetables. Each show had its own style, but they all had one thing in common. They spoke simple, clear English that I could understand. And even when I didn't understand everything, I kept watching. I learned to guess the meaning from their actions, their faces, their voices. At first, I only watched shows for kids. But as I grew more confident, I tried watching shows for older children too. I remember the first time I watched a full 15-minute episode of a show without pausing. It was about a girl who loved baking cupcakes. She invited her friends over, made a big mess in the kitchen, and laughed a lot. I understood most of it, and the parts I didn't understand, I didn't panic. I just kept going. I started to notice something strange and wonderful. The more I watched, the more English words popped into my head, even when I wasn't watching anything. I would be walking to school and hear Max's voice in my head, "Let's go to the park." I would be making tea and hear the baking girl say, "Yummy cupcakes." These voices stayed with me. They became my friends, my guides. They weren't just cartoon characters anymore. They were helping me think in English. One evening, my mom came into the room and asked, "Olivia, what are you laughing at?" I was watching a cartoon about 2 silly frogs who tried to build a rocket to the moon. They kept falling, slipping, and shouting, "Oops!" and "Try again." I turned to my mom and said, "It's funny, Mom. They don't give up." She smiled and said, "And you don't either." That night, I realized something very important. These shows were not just teaching me language. They were teaching me how to feel more confident, more comfortable, more me in English. I was beginning to understand jokes. I was laughing in English. I was reacting in English. And slowly, I began to speak more in English too. At school, I tried using some of the sentences I had learned from the shows. When a friend dropped her pencil, I said, "Oops, try again," just like the frog from the cartoon. She laughed and said, "Hey, that's from the video we watched in class." That made me feel proud. I had remembered it. I had used it. I had spoken English naturally. Sometimes I would pretend I was in the show. I would walk around my room, pretending to be the main character. "Hi, I'm Olivia, and today I'm going to the store." I would pick up my backpack and say, "Let's get ready." I would open my closet and say, "What should I wear today?" I wasn't just watching the shows anymore. I was living them. I was turning my world into a little English world. Even made my own game. I called it Speak Like the Show. Every night, I picked one short episode. I watched it 3 times. First, I watched and listened. Second, I watched and repeated each sentence, trying to sound just like the character. Third, I closed my eyes and tried to say the lines without watching. Sometimes I forgot parts, but that was okay. I was practicing, I was learning, and most of all, I was enjoying every second of it. My English teacher noticed a change in me, too. One day she said, "Olivia, your pronunciation is much better now. Have you been practicing more? I nodded and said, Yes, I watch English shows every day. She smiled and said, Keep doing that. It's working. That small compliment made my heart feel big. It showed me that the fun I was having was also helping me grow. Soon, my classmates started asking me what I watched. I shared my favorite shows with them. Some of them began watching too. We even started talking about the episodes at lunch. Did you see what Max did yesterday? That monkey is so funny. Our English was not perfect, but we were using it. We were communicating. We were connecting. And that, I learned, was what language was really for. The shows became my teachers, my friends, my daily habit. I no longer needed someone to tell me, You should practice English. I wanted to. I looked forward to it. I loved it. And through this love, something beautiful happened. One morning, while I was brushing my hair, I looked in the mirror and said, Good morning, Olivia. Today is going to be a great day. And I said it in English, naturally, without thinking, without fear. That was the moment I knew I was no longer just learning English. I was living it, and I didn't want to stop there. Watching shows had helped me hear English. Now I wanted to do something more. I wanted to use English in real life. I wanted to speak to real people, not just cartoon characters. I wanted to practice with someone who could answer me back. That's how I took the next step in my journey. I practiced speaking with myself in the mirror. After spending so many days watching English shows and repeating the lines out loud, something new began to happen inside me. My ears were sharper, my mouth moved more freely, and my thoughts sometimes came in English without even trying. But there was still one thing missing: a real conversation. I had been listening and repeating, yes, but I wasn't really talking. I wasn't truly expressing my own words. And deep down, I knew I needed to speak for real. I needed to hear my own voice, not just copy someone else's, but create my own sentences. One evening, while brushing my hair, I stood in front of the mirror and said softly, Good morning, Olivia. Today is going to be a great day. I smiled at my reflection. I had said that same sentence a few times before, but this time it felt different. I wasn't just practicing, I was talking to myself, in English. That tiny moment stayed with me. That night, I lay in bed and thought about it. I thought about how easy it had felt to speak to the girl in the mirror. She didn't laugh at me. She didn't correct me. She didn't make me feel shy. She just listened. And then I realized something important. The girl in the mirror could be my first speaking partner. I didn't need to wait for someone else. I didn't need to feel scared in front of other people. I could start right there, in my own room, with my own reflection. So the next day after school, I made a small plan. I told myself, from today, I will talk to myself in English every single day. I wrote it down in my notebook. Mirror, talk, 5 minutes daily. I underlined it twice with a red pen and drew a little mirror next to it. Then I stood up, walked to my mirror, took a deep breath, and began. At first, it felt strange. I looked at myself and said, Hello, Olivia. How are you today? Then I smiled and answered, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? It was funny, talking to myself like that. But I didn't stop. I asked more questions. What did you do today? What did you eat? What do you want to do tomorrow? I tried to answer each one, even if my answers were simple. Sometimes I made mistakes. I forgot words. I said things the wrong way. But it didn't matter. The mirror didn't care. It was always there, always waiting, always listening. And that made me feel free. Every day after school, I spent 5 to 10 minutes talking to myself. At first, I used easy words and short sentences. Today, I went to school. I studied math. I played with my friends. Slowly, I started adding more detail. Today, I had math class. We learned about shapes. I liked the part where we used colors to draw triangles and circles. The more I spoke, the more I realized I had so much to say, and English was giving me the power to say it. One day, something amazing happened. I had a really hard day at school. I felt sad because I didn't do well on my science test. When I got home, I didn't feel like watching any shows. I just wanted to be alone. But then I remembered my mirror. I stood in front of it and began to speak. Today was hard. I didn't get a good grade. I feel sad, but it's okay. I will try again. As I spoke those words, I looked into my own eyes, and I felt comforted. I wasn't just practicing English anymore. I was comforting myself in English. I was using the language not just to study, but to feel better, to understand myself, to stay strong. From that day on, mirror speaking became more than just a practice. It became a part of my life. I used it to prepare for school presentations. I used it to talk about my dreams. I used it when I was nervous, excited, or even when I had no one else to talk to. The mirror became my best listener. Sometimes I acted like I was in a real conversation. I would imagine someone asking me questions. I would answer in full sentences. What's your favorite color? My favorite color is blue because it reminds me of the sky. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a teacher because I love helping others learn. Other times I told little stories to myself. I would look into the mirror and say, once upon a time, there was a girl named Olivia who wanted to speak English fluently. And I would continue from there. It didn't matter if the story was silly or short. What mattered was that I was speaking. I was building confidence, word by word, sentence by sentence. My pronunciation also improved. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I could see how my mouth moved. I paid attention to how I said words like world, really, and beautiful. These words used to be difficult for me, but with daily mirror practice, I said them more clearly. I even made funny faces sometimes, trying to get the sound just right. My parents noticed the difference. One day my dad said, "Olivia, your English sounds stronger now. Are you taking extra classes?" I smiled and said, "No, I talk to myself in the mirror." He laughed, but he looked proud. There were moments when I felt silly or tired. Some days I stood in front of the mirror and said, "I don't know what to say." But even then, I tried. I would describe what I was wearing. I am wearing a blue shirt and black pants. Or I would describe the weather. It is sunny outside today. Even when I had nothing exciting to say, I still spoke. And that made all the difference. Over time, something magical began to happen. My fear of speaking slowly disappeared. When I was in class and the teacher asked a question, I raised my hand more often. When my friends asked me something in English, I answered without waiting too long. I didn't worry so much about being perfect. I just focused on communicating. And all that practice in front of the mirror helped me feel ready. One afternoon, I had a big surprise. Our English teacher announced that we would each give a short speech in front of the class. My heart jumped. I was nervous. But then I remembered I had already practiced speaking every day. I had already said full sentences, answered questions, and told stories. I went home, stood in front of the mirror, and practiced my speech 3 times. The next day, when it was my turn, I stood tall and spoke clearly. I even smiled. And when I finished, my classmates clapped. My teacher said, "Great job, Olivia." And I knew it was because of all those talks in the mirror. Looking back, I realized that the mirror gave me a safe space to grow. It gave me the chance to hear my own voice, correct myself, and build trust in myself. It taught me that I didn't need to wait for the perfect time or the perfect partner. I could start right where I was, with what I had, just me and my reflection, and as I stood there one evening watching the sun go down outside my window, I whispered to myself, "You're doing well, Olivia. Keep going." That was the moment I felt ready to take one more step. I had talked to myself for weeks, even months. Now I wanted to talk to someone else, not just in my imagination or in the mirror, but for real. I wanted to use my English to connect, to share, to laugh, and to learn with another person. That's when I remembered my old friend from math class, Sophia. She was always kind, always patient, and best of all, she also wanted to improve her English. I knew then what I had to do. I took a deep breath and said out loud, "Tomorrow, I will ask Sophia if we can practice English together." And that was the beginning of something new. I made mistakes, but I never gave up. The next morning, I woke up feeling nervous. I had promised myself the night before that I would talk to Sophia, my classmate, and ask her to practice English with me. But as I walked to school, holding my books tightly against my chest, I began to doubt myself. What if she says no? What if I forget my words? What if I make a mistake and look silly? But then I remembered how far I had come. I remembered the hours I had spent in front of my mirror, practicing every day. I remembered how I had gone from short, simple sentences to full thoughts and real feelings in English. And most of all, I remembered the promise I made to myself. I would keep going, no matter how hard it was. At lunch, I saw Sophia sitting at a table near the window. She was eating her sandwich and reading a book. I walked over, my heart beating. Fast, I smiled and sat down next to her. "Hi, Sophia," I said, my voice soft. She looked up and smiled back. "Hey, Olivia, what's up?" I took a deep breath. I've been practicing English a lot, and I was wondering, would you like to practice with me? Maybe we can talk in English sometimes? Sophia's eyes lit up. "Oh, that sounds great. I need practice too. Let's do it." Just like that, something changed. We started simple. At lunch, we would ask each other questions in English like, "What did you do yesterday?" Or "What's your favorite movie?" At first, it was fun and light. But soon, we started talking about real things, like school problems, family, and dreams for the future. But speaking with Sophia also made me realize something new. I still made many mistakes. Sometimes I forgot the right word. Sometimes I mixed up the grammar. One day I was telling her, "Yesterday I go to the mall," and she gently corrected me. "You mean went, Olivia." I laughed and said, "Yes, that's right. Thank you." There were other times I said things that didn't make sense. I would say something like, "I very like apples," and Sophia would look confused for a moment before helping me say, "I really like apples," or I like apples a lot. At first, those little mistakes made me feel embarrassed. I would blush and sometimes even want to stop speaking. But then I remembered something important. I was learning. And mistakes were part of learning. In fact, Sophia told me something that stayed with me. One day, after I apologized for a mistake, she said, "Olivia, don't be sorry. You're doing great. We learn by making mistakes." That sentence became my new belief. Every mistake I made meant I was trying. Every correction was a chance to grow. There was one day I remember very clearly. We were walking home from school, speaking in English, and I said, "Today I feel tired." Sophia smiled and gently said, "You can say I feel tired or I am tired, but not both together." I paused and repeated after her, "I feel tired." "Perfect," she said, giving me a high five. We laughed, and I felt proud. Not because I was perfect, but because I learned something new. Still, there were hard days. Days when my mouth couldn't find the right words. Days when my mind felt full and slow. There were times I felt like I was going backward instead of forward. Once, during an English class presentation, I got so nervous that I forgot everything I had practiced. I stood in front of the class, my hands shaking, my voice quiet. I started to speak. "My favorite animal is the..." And then my mind went blank. I looked at the teacher. I looked at my classmates. I looked at the floor. My heart pounded. Everyone was quiet. Then I heard a gentle voice from the front row. "You can do it, Olivia." It was Sophia. She smiled at me, her eyes full of kindness. I took a deep breath. I remembered the words I had practiced. Slowly, I began again. "My favorite animal is the dolphin. It is smart. It swims fast. I like dolphins because they are friendly." When I finished, everyone clapped. I walked back to my seat, my cheeks red, but my heart light. I had made mistakes. I had frozen, but I didn't give up. I kept going. After that day, I grew stronger. I kept practicing. I kept speaking. I kept making mistakes and learning from them. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk at home, doing my homework. I looked at my English notebook. I had written a sentence that said, "She can sings well." I stared at it. Something felt wrong. Then I realized it. You don't need as after can. I quickly erased it and wrote, "She can sing well." I smiled. Without anyone helping me, I had caught my own mistake. That was a big moment for me. My confidence grew. Not because I was perfect, but because I had become brave enough to fail. I started reading English books. At first, I didn't understand everything. I used a pencil to circle the words I didn't know. I looked them up later and wrote their meanings in a small notebook. Some words I had to check again and again. But slowly, they stayed in my memory. Even writing became part of my learning. I wrote short stories in English about my day, my dreams, or imaginary adventures. I didn't worry about grammar at first. I just wrote. Then I would go back, read it aloud, and fix the parts that didn't sound right. I made many small mistakes, wrong tenses, missing words, or using the wrong form. But every mistake taught me something. There was one evening when my mom looked at my notebook and said, "Olivia, you write a lot in English now." I nodded. "Yes, I still make mistakes, though." She smiled and said, "But you keep trying. That's what matters." Those words made me feel proud. There were also days when I doubted myself. Days I felt like I wasn't improving. Days when I saw others speaking English better than me and I thought, I'll never be that good. But even then, I didn't stop. Remembered how I started, with just one sentence, with one word, with small steps. And now I could speak with a friend. I could read books. I could give a presentation. I could correct my own mistakes. I thought about giving up sometimes, but I never did, because I had learned something even more important than grammar or vocabulary. I had learned patience, belief, and strength. And deep inside, I knew I was closer than ever to becoming fluent. But I also knew that fluency wasn't just about speaking perfectly. It was about trying again after you fall. It was about showing up every day. It was about never giving up. So I kept going, and I was ready for the next part of my journey, one that would take all my lessons and turn them into true confidence. I spoke English every day, even when I was scared. After I learned not to be afraid of my mistakes, something inside me started to change. I began to feel more free. It was like a heavy door had opened in my mind. I still made mistakes, of course, but now I saw them as part of the path. I stopped saying, I'm not good at English, and I started saying, I'm still learning. That small change helped me move forward. But there was still one big problem. I was scared to speak English in real-life situations, with strangers, with people at stores, or even on the phone. At school, I was okay with Sophia and a few friends. But outside of that, I froze. I would walk into a coffee shop, and when I had to order something in English, my heart would beat so fast. I would forget simple words like coffee or milk or even please. I would look at the person behind the counter, open my mouth, and then just point at the menu. I hated that feeling. One day I sat on my bed and thought deeply, why am I still scared? I whispered to myself. I had practiced so much. I had watched shows, talked in front of the mirror, made mistakes, and kept going. So why did I still feel nervous when it was time to speak English with real people? The answer was clear. I was scared of being judged. I was afraid people would laugh at me or not understand me. I was afraid someone might say, "What are you trying to say?" in a rude way. That fear sat in my stomach like a heavy stone. But I didn't want that fear to control me anymore. I had come too far to stop now, so I made a new rule for myself. I would speak English every single day, even if I was scared. The next morning, I woke up early and repeated my rule out loud. Today I will speak English, no matter what. When I got to school, I didn't wait for someone to talk to me. I walked up to a group of girls standing near the lockers. I smiled and said, "Good morning. How are you?" One girl turned and smiled back. "Hey, Olivia. I'm good. How about you?" We talked a little bit. My voice shook a little, but I didn't stop. I made one or two small grammar mistakes, but I didn't care. I had spoken in English, just like I promised myself. That day, I also talked to my math teacher in English after class. I had a question about the homework. Normally, I would write it down or ask Sophia to help me ask. But that day, I raised my hand, walked up to the teacher and asked, "Excuse me, can you help me with this part?" He smiled and explained it. I understood everything he said. I even said thank you and smiled back before walking away. Felt strong. That night I wrote in my journal, "I spoke English twice today. I was scared, but I did it. I feel proud." And that became my new habit. Every day I had to speak English, at least once. I didn't care how small it was, even if it was just asking, "Can you help me?" or saying hi to someone in the hallway. I had to do it. The days turned into weeks. Some days were easy. Some days were very hard. There was a day when I walked into a bookstore. I wanted to ask the man behind the desk where to find English storybooks. My hands were sweaty. My lips were dry. But I walked up and said, "Hi, can you tell me where the English books are?" He looked up and said, "Sure. Aisle 3, right behind you." It was only one sentence, but I did it. Another time, I had to call the dentist to make an appointment. I had never made a phone call in English before. I wrote down what I wanted to say on a piece of paper. "Hello. I'd like to make an appointment. My name is Olivia. Can I come on Friday?" I held the paper in one hand and my phone in the other. I dialed the number. My heart was racing. When someone answered, I said my line slowly. The woman on the phone was very kind. She even repeated some things for me and spoke slowly when she heard my accent. In the end, I had an appointment for Friday. When I hung up the phone, I couldn't. Stop smiling. I ran to the mirror and said, "You did it. You made a call in English." Still, not every day was perfect. One afternoon, I went to a clothing store. I wanted to ask if they had a dress in a different size. I walked up to the worker and said, "Do you have this in big size?" She looked confused and said, "Sorry." I repeated, "Big size, more big." She nodded slowly and said, "Oh, you mean a larger size?" "Yes," I said, laughing. "Larger size. Thank you." She found it for me, and I tried it on. As I stood in the fitting room, I thought to myself, I said it wrong. But she understood me. And now I know the right word. Larger. That's how it worked. Every time I made a mistake, I learned a better way to say it next time. Little by little, I got braver. There was a time when my English teacher asked the class, "Who wants to give their book report first?" Nobody raised their hand, but I did. I stood up and gave my report in English. I spoke slowly, clearly, and with confidence. I had practiced in front of the mirror. I had spoken the lines to myself while walking to school. And now I was sharing it with the whole class. After I finished, the teacher said, "Well done, Olivia. That was very clear." Even my classmates clapped. That was one of the best days of my school life. From that day on, I stopped waiting for the perfect moment. I stopped thinking, "Maybe tomorrow I'll try." No. Every day was my chance. Even when I felt scared. Especially when I felt scared. Fear became my signal to act, not to hide. One morning, I got on the school bus and sat next to a new girl. She looked nervous. I could tell she was new to the school. I turned to her and said, "Hi, I'm Olivia. Are you new here?" She looked surprised, then smiled and nodded. "Yes, I'm Emily." "Nice to meet you, Emily. If you need help, I can show you around." We started talking. She was from another town and also learning English. We helped each other. I had gone from being the girl too scared to speak to the girl helping someone else feel brave. Speaking English every day wasn't always easy. Sometimes I was tired. Sometimes I didn't want to make an effort. But I made it a rule, no matter what, speak a little. Every single day. Some days I talked to friends. Some days I talked to teachers. Some days I just asked questions at the grocery store. Sometimes I only spoke 1 or 2 sentences, but I did it, and guess what? After a few months I didn't feel scared anymore. Speaking English started to feel natural, like brushing my teeth or tying my shoes. I didn't have to think about it so much. The words came faster. The sentences felt smoother. People around me noticed too. One of my teachers said, "Olivia, your English has improved so much. You speak with confidence now." Even my parents, who had always supported me, were amazed. My mom said, "You used to be so quiet, and now you speak English like you were born with it." That made me smile. But I knew the truth. I wasn't born with it. I worked for it. I practiced it. I faced my fear every day, even when I was scared. Especially then, because that's how I grew. That's how I changed. That's how I became fluent, by speaking English every single day.